Thank you, everybody. I'd like to call the Committee of the Whole of May 16th to order at 5 p.m. We'll start with a land acknowledgement. We are pleased to be here today on the traditional territory of Treaty 6. We acknowledge all those who share a deep connection with this land. The City of Beaumont respects the histories, languages, and cultures of all of Canada's First Peoples, whether they be of First Nation, Métis, or Inuit descent, and appreciates that their presence continues to enrich Canada's vibrant communities. As we gather here in the traditional Treaty 6 territory, we acknowledge that we are all treaty people and have ongoing responsibilities to protect and honor all of life. Thank you. And now we'll move on to the adoption of the agenda. Administration, do we have any changes to the agenda this evening?
Thank you, Chair. We don't have any adoptions to the agenda.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Council, just looking for a motion to adopt the agenda, please. Sorry, I'm missing the button here to
I think I'm
allow.
on. I think I'm on. I'll make that motion, Chair, that the May 16th, 2023 Committee of the Whole meeting agenda be adopted as presented.
Thank you. And start the vote on that now, please. Looks like the vote is completed. That's all in favor and unanimous. Thank you. Now I'm just looking to see if on the adoption of the minutes, if anyone has any questions on the minutes from April 18th Committee of the Whole. Any questions from committee members at all on that? Seeing none. We'll start the vote on that. Please and thank you. April 18th. Oh, sorry. Look for stop the vote there. Okay, looking for a motion to adopt the minutes from April 18th, 2023, please. Mayor Daniluk. I'm not seeing the button that I need here to.
It could be
Just a second. Yeah.
Oh, I have it on now. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll move that the April 18, 2023 Committee of the Whole meeting minutes be adopted as presented.
Okay.
Thank you.
Perfect. Okay, now I'll start the vote on that one. Looks like we have everybody. Again, unanimous. Thank you. Now we're on to the presentations and delegations portion of the agenda. And we will start with the EDI framework. But just ahead of the presenters here tonight, I just wanted to make just a couple of comments about how we will be, in my view, most effective as a committee here together. I think we'll be most effective when we ask clear and concise questions of the presenters. And when the presenters consequently provide clear and concise answers. And if anyone, committee or presenters needs any more time to formulate a question or response, we have that time and we can take that time. So if anyone needs more time at any point along the way, just say so and we'll make sure it's there. So thank you. And I'll pass it over to the presenters for the EDI framework and be introduced by Turning the microphone on. Perfect. Look at that one. Awesome. Ms. Wilson, over to you. Thank you.
Great, thank you. So I'd like to introduce a few people before we start this evening. So you're familiar with me. I'm Kim Williston. I am the Community and Social Development Director. Next to me, I'm pleased for you all to meet E. E. Liu is the EDI coordinator that I have talked so much about. She does exist. She's here with me this evening. And E is one of the leads on this project. Also on the screen, we have the consultants from Level Up Consulting. We have Lavleen Sahota, she, her, and we have Lindsay Francis, they, she, and we also have somewhere, we have Christy. Christy couldn't be with us in person because she's at home feeling unwell. So, so we have three on screen and me and myself here in person. Because there's a lot of content here, just to let you know that the purpose of the report tonight is to give you an overview. So it's an overview of the framework that you all received a copy of. And we're going to go straight into it with Lavleen, who has a PowerPoint presentation that she's going to walk us all through.
Thank you.
So much. Thanks so much, Kim. And thank you, Chair, Mayor, and Council for having us today. As Kim mentioned, my name is Lavleen Sahota from Level Up Planning. My pronouns are she, her. I'm the daughter of Punjabi immigrants and now settler on the unceded occupied territories of the Hunkaminam speaking peoples in what's also known as Delta, BC. And I'll pass it over to Lindsay to introduce themselves.
Hello, everyone. My name is Lindsay Francis, and my pronouns are she and they. I'm originally from Nova Scotia, but I'm here settling on Treaty 6 territory as well. And it's great to be here with you all today.
And as Kim mentioned, we'll provide a high-level overview of the EDI framework, a little bit about this work, how we got here, and then outlining some of the key actions. And we'll try to be as concise as possible and leave time for questions as well. Next slide, please.
Oh, that would be me. Sorry, everybody.
Thanks so much. And we want to acknowledge that this work occurred on the traditional territory of the Treaty 6 peoples and the homeland of the Métis. We are very grateful for the stewardship of these lands since time immemorial, and honor all those who have deep connections with the land that we were privileged to work on. Next slide, please. And so a little bit about us at Level Up Planning Collaborative. We're a women-owned, multidisciplinary consulting collaborative focused on supporting organizations and communities to become stronger, healthier, and more equitable. And so some of the work that we do includes research and planning support, evidence reviews, needs assessments, policy analyses, community engagement strategies, and evaluation framework. And some of the areas that we work in include social planning, equity, community health and well-being, health impact assessments, and evaluations. And we've also moved into helping organizations and local governments implement their frameworks and strategies, which can often be such as the EDI framework high level. And so we help people figure out how to implement these so that it makes sense in their day-to-day work as well. Next slide. And so what is this work all about? Maybe we can start a bit by defining the terms, equity, diversity, and inclusion. While connected, they are distinct. So diversity is ensuring that there is an honoring and respect for the variety of backgrounds, perspectives, cultures, and experiences that each of us bring. Inclusion is when people can bring their whole identity to their community or their organization and not just be tolerated, but actually accepted and welcomed. So this is more about the come as you are without having to conform to a so-called norm. And then equity is just and fair inclusion where all individuals can participate and thrive. So people with different or shared identities might need different levels of support to actually achieve equity. And yes, there's lots of terms out there and acronyms, but at the end of the day, what this work is about ensuring that all people in Beaumont have a sense of belonging. They have the spaces, resources, amenities that they need to feel a sense of participation, belonging, and connection within the community. Next slide, please. And so why has the city embarked on doing EDI work? As you're all aware, and as noted in the council report, the population of Beaumont is rapidly growing. There's been a 19.4% increase in population since 2016. And along with that has come an increase in diversity, with Punjabi now being the second most common language spoken at home. And as this quote highlights, the population is changing. So it's now up to those in power to either embrace that change or stick with the status quo. But luckily, Beaumont has decided to, embrace the change and really meet the needs of the changing demographic in Beaumont. And completing or coming up with the equity framework is one example of really meeting the needs of the community. And I'll pass it over to Lindsay to tell you how we did the work that we did.
Thanks, Loveline. So how did we get to where we are today? Well, our project was divided into 3 phases, and the first was our foundation building phase. And in this phase, we did a community profile of Beaumont. We reviewed various city policies. We did a literature review, and we did an environmental scan of EDI best practices. Additionally, we also met with the Beaumont Interagency Group to gather their input to help guide the work. And then we had our second phase, which was our community engagement phase. And here, with the help of administration, we developed a community engagement strategy. And this was specifically developed to engage residents who are typically underrepresented. So we did a variety of activities, including interviews, focus groups, outreach, and drop-in events. And we had a total of more than 222 participants. And lastly, phase 3 was where we put everything together. So everything we learned from phase 1 and phase 2 was integrated into the Belonging in Beaumont Equity and Diversity and Inclusion Framework. Next slide. So next we will go into more detail about the framework itself and the key highlights. Next slide. So the EDI framework includes 6 guiding principles, and these principles give an overarching approach to guide the city when working towards the goals of the framework. And they include courage. So courage as the guiding principle means that if mistakes are made, the city will reflect and learn while staying committed to advancing EDI work. Challenge hierarchies and power structures. So decision makers and leaders recognize the power that they hold and how they use it to influence change and make efforts to share or cede the power to staff and residents. So people in positions of power can model the behavior, attitudes, and practices they wish others to embody. Eliminating silos. So internal departments share information and resources, which better enable them to be informed on equity and inclusion work within the community and how they can contribute in their own roles. Responsiveness. So this principle is about how the city responds to feedback from the community or city staff, and that it's met with a willingness to discuss, even if it's negative or feels uncomfortable. Transparency. This is key to building trust, and it includes communicating with the public and sharing information on what actions will be taken and why. And it's important that this is a two-way dialogue that allows the community to ask questions, share input, and hold the city accountable. And the last guiding principle is flexibility. So city processes enable administration to create connections and build relationships with the community, as well as respond to different community needs and consider reducing barriers faced by equity deserving groups. So that's an overview of the principles. Next, we have the framework and the key actions within it. So there's 10 key action areas, and the actions range from high-level strategic initiatives to more concrete steps that can be achieved relatively quickly. So next, I'll hand it off to Laveline to go over the first few.
Thanks so much, Lindsay. Next slide, please. So the first action area that we have is leadership and commitment to EDI, as strong leadership will be crucial for moving this work forward. So this means the city as a whole, mayor, council, senior leadership team, and all staff really commit to and champion EDI initiatives. And what's really important as a first step in implementing the Belonging in Beaumont framework is creating, establishing, carrying out a vision for the future of Beaumont. So the vision really is the what and the why for doing this work. It articulates shared values across the organization, goals, and priorities. For example, this is something that could be created and championed by mayor and council, senior leaders, and others who hold positions of power, and can be outlined in, for example, the city's strategic plan as an explicit priority. Ultimately, a well-formulated vision for a more equitable and inclusive Beaumont should be a common thread that runs throughout all the city's ongoing work. And so recommendations that we have outlined in this action area include being really clear about the vision, demonstrating the leadership and commitment within the organization and the community to really offer long-term follow-through and accountability when it comes to equity, diversity, and inclusion. Next slide, please. The second key action area is education, or really learning. Without internal reflection, learning about key concepts and lived experiences of others, it's really easy to turn EDI-related work into more of a checkbox exercise. But if we learn about the importance of this work, what it entails, that will lead to more meaningful and authentic actions versus those that are tokenistic. So this is all about doing the internal work within the city and within ourselves to ensure that the city creates an inclusive and equitable environment for staff within the organization and also for the residents that it's serving. And so recommendations in this action area include providing education and training opportunities for all city staff, key partners, and residents to learn about what equity, diversity, inclusion work is all about, but also recognizing that not everybody is going to be at the same level. So that would require kind of meeting people where they're at. It also includes examining, challenging, and reflecting on EDI practice in both personal and the institutional level. And it also requires the creation of a safer learning environment for all. Next slide, please. The third action area is conducting a current state assessment. So this is where you're going to learn about where the city is currently at in terms of equity, diversity, inclusion, and then envisioning an end goal. So the current state assessment can help measure progress over time and also help with the actions that it might take to get to the certain place that you're trying to go. And it also will help to learn about the needs of the organization and community moving forward. And we've provided some examples in the framework about equity audit tools and benchmarks that are currently out there. There's some evidence-based tools that are being used in different organizations. But at the end of the day, this is about having ongoing conversations with staff and the community to ensure that we're really meeting the needs of those that we're trying to affect with this framework. Next slide, please. And really related to the current state assessment is the fourth action area, building partnerships and relationships. Relationships are at the heart of equity, diversity, inclusion related work. To really learn about community needs, trusting relationships are required. So this means taking the time and effort to reach out to populations that the city does not typically hear from without any expectations in return. This might also mean going beyond traditional modes of engagement by meeting people where they're at, conducting outreach, offering incentives or honoraria, and really just being creative to ensure that underrepresented voices are heard. So in this action area, what the recommendations are to form those trusting relationships with the community, especially those that are typically underrepresented, and learning about the needs of all residents, not just those with the loudest voices. Next slide, please. And the fifth action area is policy and practice. As we know, policies are a powerful tool that guide the work of the city, and inclusive and equitable policies are those that work for everyone, eliminate power imbalances or hierarchies, and result in stronger collaboration and partnerships. So some of the recommendations we have in this action area include creating an equity lens tool. And for example, a tool can be a set of questions that you ask when policies or practices are being created or change. Some of those questions might include things like, who's going to benefit from this policy, program, or initiative or service? Who might be excluded from those benefits and why? Who might be harmed? Have we made important decisions with the direct input of those who will be most affected by that decision? And from whose perspective are we evaluating the success of our project, program, or policy? Another recommendation for this action area is to really broaden the EDI policy-based work by creating a reconciliation framework and an accessibility strategy. While an equity, diversity, inclusion strategy is connected to a reconciliation strategy and an accessibility framework, there really is a recognition that a reconciliation framework needs to be distinct from this work. A reconciliation framework works to identify and dismantle colonial structures and systems and cannot really be merged into other initiatives. Otherwise, you risk the possibility of watering down that important work. And so that's something that's separate from this framework and needs to be explicitly pursued by the city and leadership. And I'll pass it over to Lindsay to go over the next few action areas.
Thank you, Loveleen. Our next action area is building capacity. So when it comes to EDI work, everyone's sort of starting at a different place and different understanding. So one of the things that's key here is building capacity. And this is more than just training. It also includes supporting people along their journey, having adequate resources and funding to hold up this work. So to hold up this work in a sustainable way, it needs to be a priority for the city and has to be done proactively, not in a reactionary way or sort of a on the side of people's desks sort of way. So our key recommendations here are to establish an EDI office, to ensure that there's funding and grants available for programs and services that support equity deserving groups, and also to develop and participate in an EDI community of practice. That way, if you're connecting with other municipalities, say, that are undergoing EDI work, you can share resources and continue to learn from each other. Next slide. The next is communications. So the key messages that come from the city are a reflection of the city's values. So it's important that the communications also incorporate that EDI approach. So this means thinking about diverse representation in images, messages, having accessible communication materials, and making efforts to ensure that communication channels are available to all residents. So here we've recommended using communication tools to highlight EDI work in the community. One example of that would be sharing this framework with the community. Another thing we've recommended is promoting city and community events and initiatives related to EDI. Updating the city website to be more user-friendly and easy to navigate, and making information available in different languages. And lastly, creating an EDI resource page for staff. Next slide. During our community engagement, residents spoke about the need for better representation. However, increasing diversity cannot happen in a tokenistic way. What needs to happen first is creating safe, inclusive spaces where everyone feels like they belong. Our recommended actions here are acknowledging culturally significant holidays and hosting or co-hosting cultural events, having library books available in different languages, having diverse representation on the events committee that reflects the city's demographics, and developing a toolkit for equitable and transparent recruitment and hiring. Next slide. Next, we've got the inclusive built environment. So the built environment is the physical and social spaces created in a city, such as parks, roads, housing, and these spaces can offer ways to connect with one another. And as a winter city, there's special consideration of the built environment in Beaumont. So one example would be the skate park was identified as one of the few places that youth can gather, but it's unavailable to them in the winter. Also during public engagement, public transportation was frequently noted a barrier to connectivity in Beaumont. So the key actions recommended are providing spaces for people to gather and connect, especially in the winter, and ensuring outside spaces are accessible and safe. So providing things like covered benches, nearby washrooms, and good lighting. Updating the municipal naming policy to ensure names are inclusive and culturally safe. And providing residents with opportunities to connect to different parts of the city through safe and accessible transportation options and walking paths. Next slide. And our last action area is monitoring and reporting. So EDI work happens in a cycle as opposed to a linear path. So it's important to monitor progress over time and establish sound data collection methods to allow consistency for reporting throughout the implementation process. So we've recommended to monitor and evaluate the success of the EDI framework elements over time. And one of the ways we can do this is by asking questions on the activities and outputs. So how much did we do? How well did we do it? Also asking questions about the impacts and outcomes. What impact did we have? Who's better off? Why and how? We also recommend sharing the monitoring and evaluating reports with the community and going through this process that you identify opportunities to make improvements over time in a process of continual feedback. And lastly, to celebrate successes when you do have them. And now I'll hand it back to Laveline for the last few slides.
Thanks, Lindsay. As mentioned, the implementation of this framework isn't a linear process. It's cyclical, it's not a checkbox exercise. And again, we kind of blew through this information. And so as you probably gather, this is going to be challenging work. It's not easy. There's many ways to do this work, but if at the core of it, we center relationships, we listen, we learn, we reflect, and we act, we respond, then you'll have a better chance at success. This work is going to take time. Some things will work better than others, and really the framework should be seen as a living document. But the framework really does offer an idea of where to start, and it will require, ongoing investment, participation from all, and just a recognition that this isn't going to be easy, but that willingness to do will go a long way in ensuring that people all residents within Beaumont feel that sense of belonging. Next slide, please. And again, just in the interest of time, that's it for our presentation, but we do want to leave it open for questions that I'm sure you all have. And thank you again for having us today.
Yeah, thank you to the presenters for the great bunch of work that's been done here to date, and for the presentation that you guys just put together. So that's awesome. At this point, I'd like to invite committee members to chime in with any comments or questions that you may have. And the first observation that I'll make, I'll take the first one here, is just around the engagement activities, the number of participants, and I think 222 is a good number. I don't really have a frame for that, but I was happy to see that there was a lot of folks reached along the way in that engagement. So looks like we will start with Councillor McCook, followed by Councillor Miller, and then Councillor Malkoff-Swain. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I've been waiting for this to come forward. EDI is something that I'm very passionate about, as I know how it affects our community. This report was jam-packed with a ton of great information. I don't think connecting on it in just one meeting does it justice, so I'm happy to hear that it's just an overview, and hopefully we will come back to it. Also, thank you for adding a variety of links and various tools to what other cities use. I think that will be very helpful as we work through this as well. Page 16 of the agenda, the what belonging means to Beaumont residents, really stuck with me. I think that people don't often think about what belonging means, nor do they think about what belonging might mean for various groups. So the need for acceptance really stuck out throughout this whole report. I also noticed a lot of internal comments throughout the report that really emphasized in order for us to push this, we need to do the work internally. Therefore, I just want to emphasize that point with our admin and with my council colleagues that we need to ensure that we fully support this if that's what we choose to do. And we need to be ready to put the dollars behind it to make it a success. I said when I got elected, I really wanted to ensure we made decisions through a lens of inclusion. So I was really happy to see that lens of inclusion tool, and I look forward to seeing it in practice. Just a few questions. You noted that many cities have departments focused on EDI. However, some of the cities listed were larger centers. Do you have examples of smaller cities like ours that have successfully implemented the EDI departments, or are they still kind of at the point that they're funding them on one-off positions?
The regional municipality of Wood Buffalo, which I also believe is a smaller municipality, they do have an EDI office of, I believe it was 2 staff, correct me if I'm wrong, Lindsay. And they've been doing this work for quite a long time. So they had a framework developed, I believe 2 or 3 years ago, and now they're actually revamping it, recognizing again that the municipality has changed, the demographics are changing. And so they're in a position where they've been doing this work for a while, and they're wanting to now again see internally where the city's at, what they can change. And in addition, they're also doing reconciliation work separately. So that to me is a sense that, you know, yes, obviously Edmonton and Calgary, they have the resources to do this work and have a fully staffed EDI office, but there's also smaller municipalities that have done this work successfully, maybe not as at a fast pace as those that are well resourced, but it can be done. And it just requires that commitment and that patience and that willingness to do again. But yes, we do recognize that Beaumont is one of the smaller communities, and again, not as well resourced as your neighbors in Edmonton. But it's heartening to hear that it can happen with smaller communities as well. And just really recognizing the role of champions. It's not just about, you know, the city mayor and council committing to this. There's lots of community champions. When we spoke to people during community engagement, there's so many people that are so hungry to do this work and to be involved. And if there's a way to continue to foster those relationships, this work will continue to be, you know, to build momentum in Beaumont.
Perfect. Thank you very much. I can keep going. Okay. You spoke about on page 67 of our agenda package, there was the equity lens tool, the reconciliation framework, and accessibility strategy. Is this something that will likely be done prior, or that we will require additional resources like the dedicated EDI office? Admin, I don't know if they want to take that.
Yeah, I'll take that question through the chair to Councillor Cook. We are very conscious it takes resources. We have E, and E can only do so much. So we are currently looking at the recommendations, and E is putting together a plan to look at what we can actually physically do with the current resources, and then sort of forecasting what we're going to need, because that equity tool is really, really key. But it takes time. So absolutely, we recognize that we have some limitations currently, but we are looking forward as well as to what those resources might look like.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. So that'll be something that will still come forward to us
Through the budget process.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. And then I presume, however, do we have a current plan as to how we will share this framework with the community, or are we still kind of working through that?
So I can share, sorry, through the chair to Councillor McCook. Thank you for your question. I think for an EDI framework, we had the engagement sessions, we collect all like the public's opinions, and at the end, I think it's a good idea to share the EDI framework with the public. We can use multiple mediums like the social media, our social media platforms. We can also put them on our website, like City of Beaumont website. We can also print them and share them with our residents at like public places like our community center and the recreation center. So we can use multiple mediums to send this EDI framework to the public. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you. Yeah, I just want to make sure that we do have a plan and that it does kind of get communicated out to those who weren't part of the some of the other outreach stuff. One more question. That's right.
Yeah, give her.
So as was mentioned throughout, the work needs to happen internally, but also needs to happen externally with each department as well. We'll need to integrate and implement pieces of it. And I believe that a strong EDI framework for municipality means that it is interwoven into all the departments. What would be the best advice to ensure that each department takes a part of this and ensures that all departments work together towards these goals? Would this be best done through the EDI department to connect all departments on this work?
I'll take that one.
If-
Oh, sorry, go ahead then, Lovely.
We strongly recommended an EDI department that included additional staff in addition to E, recognizing that she isn't able to do all this work. And in an ideal world, it would be great if there was that kind of hub of an EDI department that did connect with every single department within the city to figure out how to implement this work. How is this work meaningful for them? What does it mean for them? Really getting a sense of what each department does and how the policies, procedures that they carry out can be done in a more equitable way. So that was sort of our thought for that, but I'll pass it over to you, Kim.
Thanks, Lovely. And also building on that, we recognize that it has to be a whole of organization approach. So this framework was originally and still is to a certain extent an external facing framework, but of course it's the chicken and the egg. There has to be the internal piece and the external piece, and they have to be aligned together. So that's the next piece that we have to take a look at as well. How internally do we incorporate this across all the departments? Haven't got the answers just yet, but stay tuned.
Okay, stay tuned. Okay, thank you. Thank you so much. That's it for me, Chair. And thank you again for the really great work on this report.
Yeah, thank you for the well-prepared questions. It's no doubt there's a lot of heavy lifting left to do with this one. Over to you, Councillor Miller.
Thank you, and thank you very much for the presentation. Thank you, Councillor McCook, for your questions to kind of get things started here. I really like how you emphasize that it starts internally before externally. So for me, I kind of learned from specific examples, and I read a lot in here of a lot of things. I just have a couple questions regarding specific things such as, can you please tell me what educational courses and training will be provided to our city staff and potentially counselors as an addition to the internal EDI?
I'm looking at Laveline, but maybe I'll take this one. So Chair through to Councillor Miller. Obviously, education is the key here. We don't know what we don't know. And I think this report has really surfaced that. And so education is going to be so important across the organization. There are other great examples of municipalities and other corporations that are doing this work. So I'm not going to suggest we're going to reinvent the wheel. We're going to adapt. We're going to take pieces of what's already out there. There's some good stuff out there, and look at how we work with our internal departments to pull that together so that there can be some sort of, I don't know, curriculum, some training that comes out through perhaps our people services. That's what we're thinking at this point.
Okay. Yeah, I pulled that out of point number 2 on education. It just talks about education and training opportunities. So I just wanted to know, specifically what kind of training opportunities and what can we maybe expect to see. I'd also like to know, and maybe this is touching on number 5. Councillor McCook touched on number 5, the policy and practice. From the description, it sounds more like that speaks to the actual implementation of these specific measures. So I'm gathering that we're not sure if the EDI department is going to be involved in each department somehow incorporating EDI into their policies. And what I mean by that is, would it be possible that training is optional, or is it mandatory for EDI for each department? Will it be written into each, department policy somehow? That's kind of what I'm getting at, if that makes any sense.
In responding to that, I think the first recommendation talked about leadership and leadership commitment. So with leadership commitment through the CAO's office, through SLT, there needs to be a discussion about the commitment on those policies and how they're embedded across the organization in all department areas. And so that's work that would need to be done. We are doing it in pieces across the organization. It's not that it's not being done, but it needs to be very intentional. It needs to be embedded in the way that we practice in all service areas for sure. Absolutely. And that's a lot of work initially up front. And that would require some additional support to be able to, to pull that together for sure.
Okay.
Sorry,
Can I add a little bit to that? So I think as we discussed before, we will do, before we can make sure what kind of trainings we'll provide, we'll see our status, like we'll do some assessments as Lovely has shared too, like to see where we're at. And then based on the different departments or at different levels of EDI, so we'll kind of provide different trainings, and there are so many online and free resources. So some municipalities and cities, they have a resource page with different links and trainings, and they provide it for their employees. So I think we kind of can monitor that and also put up some similar things, and it won't be like, it could be tailored to our different departments' needs. So yeah.
Right. Okay. Thank you for that. Yeah, I know that some municipalities, some companies, they have ED&I expectations or training available to their employees, or and it's just something that it can be measured as well, whether you're doing something monthly or it can have measures in place. And then I guess last question is, and I have this worded a little. Can you describe an example of something perhaps missing now that this will bring to our municipality? Once again, I'm looking for kind of like a specific example of something just small that you think would make a big impact and will be completely different.
I'm going to defer that to Lavleen. I have a couple, but I know Lavleen's wanting to jump in. So.
Thanks so much for that question. And yeah, it's so great to obviously have the specific examples, which we weren't necessarily able to provide in our presentation for the interest of time. So one of the things that became loud and clear at the outset of our engagement, and it goes back to kind of that first vote that we had, was about the South Asian seniors in Beaumont. Lots of them are moving here. They have English as a second language, or some of them don't even speak English, but there's no place for them to gather, especially in the winter. There's no temple there are no temples, period, in Beaumont, so they have to travel to Edmonton. They don't have transportation because the transportation, the bus route maybe isn't near their house. They can't really walk long distances to the bus route. The bus route doesn't come during times that are, convenient for them. Their children and grandchildren are at work during the day, so they're kind of confined to their homes. And it was just very touching speaking to some of these South Asian seniors, just pouring their hearts on their sleeves, saying, hey, I'm educated. Back in India, I was this. I had this many degrees. I lived a perfect, not a perfect life, but I lived a life of a lot of privileges. And I come here, just 10 minutes away from Edmonton, and it's night and day between the resources that are available in Edmonton and what I have here in Beaumont. And they just feel stuck and isolated and aren't able to connect with one another. And so that to me is an example of, we're not serving everybody in Beaumont. So an equity, diversity, inclusion is about learning about what the needs of, people who aren't coming to council chambers on a regular basis, or who aren't speaking or typing out comments in social media posts. These are the people we need to hear from, and we need to serve them because they are now living in Beaumont. And so that to me is an example of what this work can accomplish. And even in connecting with them, we did a focus group where they were all able to gather. Some of them were meeting each other for the first time. Some of them were coming to the community center for the first time. And it was just really heartening for me to see like the connections that were being made, the phone numbers that were being exchanged, and the exchange of ideas that they had. Like, we need transportation, we need to be able to gather, we need a space to be able to connect in the winter when the conditions aren't great for us to meet at the park bench. So to me, that's what this work is about, is learning about those that are being left behind, don't have the loudest voices, and really offering things like even a space for them to gather in the winter.
Great, thank you so much. Oh, am I still on? Thank you so much for the explanation. That's all for me.
Just a quick comment from the CAO.
Yes, thank you very much. Excuse me, Councilor Miller, I didn't want to let your inquiry about leadership's commitment as a great question. I wanted to reiterate that our leadership core is committed to EDI. We see so many, other than it's the right thing to do, our goal is to have a community and an organization where everybody is welcome, comfortable, has a place to go. We met with had a chance to chat with Laveline after meeting, and she just shared some of the very simple things we can do in our community to welcome people here. And I'm super excited. The senior leadership team has been talking about this for 2 years. This is not going to die because of lack of leadership, and it's going to flourish. So great question. Thank you.
Yeah, that's awesome to hear. Thank you. Councillor McCosween, you're up.
Yeah, thanks. Firstly, welcome to this. We're excited to see that you exist. Kim's been telling us great things, but great to be here. Let me just concur with Mr. Schwartz initially. We talked about how does this get implemented, and the fear is that you put all this time, or when I say you, I mean collectively the group here, put all this time and effort into it, and then it stays on a shelf. And so it's definitely about organizational culture and leadership down, and I've seen it from Mike and everyone else at senior leadership, and know that it's not going to be left behind and just kind of a check the box exercise. Because I think one of the fears when your position was created was that everyone was going to think, okay, great, we've got this amazing person over here, then we can just forget about it because they'll manage it for us. And so that organizational culture, to make sure that is integrated throughout the organization, is crucial. The key thing for me is, I've seen, certainly in my 6 years, I've seen council, the city kind of move more towards inclusiveness, openness, but I found it's been very reactive. So think about Kamloops, as tragic as that was. Those conversations started a good conversation around Indigenous reconciliation in the city. Multiple examples, but specifically George Floyd, the conversation that made us thankfully have around Black Canadians and our culture. But it was very reactive. And it was almost like you had to wait for a tragedy to have that conversation. And so what I see here, and what I was really hoping, is for us to be able to put our foot forward and get ahead of things, and not have to wait for those sort of tragedies to have the conversations and create that inclusive space. So just a kudos and a deep meaningful thank you from me for all the work that everyone has done on this. The last thing I had was, you actually spoke to it. So one of the questions I had was just around number 10 there, where it talked a bit about monitoring and evaluation. And that's one thing, but what I didn't see in there was reporting out on it. But then you spoke to it, so I'm very glad that you spoke to it. I'd want to make sure that that's included in there. Councillor Miller talked about how other organizations are looking at this, and there's not mention around targets or anything like that, but at least that reporting out, because I think without that puts pressure on the organization to deliver, right? And it gives us the confidence that what we're eventually leading to here, and hopefully supporting the plan that's been put in front of us, that gives us comfort that that is going to be a priority. And so I'm glad to see it was verbally spoken about reporting. But if there was a tweak, I'd add that word in there on number 10, just to make it explicitly clear that we will report out on this. So other than that, my councillor to the left, every budget process speaks up about this, Ms. Williston, where Steve says, bring these ideas, bring forward, and we talk about it up here throughout the year, and at budget time, hold us accountable. And so I'll put that plug in again to look at doing this. So just to save you some breath, because I know you would go there, you do it every time and do it so eloquently. So no questions for me, just a sincere appreciation for all the work that you've done. Again, welcome, and looking forward to implementing this. Thank you.
Great anticipation. Thank you. Councillor Bernhardt, over to you.
Thank you very much. I'm going to be shorter than some of my colleagues simply because my throat is not in great shape today. So I'm kind of struggling to talk here, but I think you can tell most of us, if not all of us, are definitely in favor of where this is headed, and glad to see it to this stage. I, for one, support the framework and where it's going. I have to say I'm a bit impatient with some of the timelines, though, and I'm sure you have your reasons for that. My concern would be like reviewing it with council every 2 years. That means that's the end of our term almost when we see it again, and a little change for a little time then to enact and to show that leadership. That doesn't mean there won't be opportunities. I know that you'll bring things in front of us, but that just concerns me a little bit, because if this goes into the internal piece and we don't ever hear or see or know what's happening, it's hard for us to show that leadership and to help and support you where it's going. So just put that idea in your head. If there's ways that we can be supportive on an ongoing basis, I for one would definitely like to see that. A specific for me that you won't be surprised at, Ms. Williston, is the hiring a newcomer liaison. That was one of the things that I was hoping we would see more support for people moving into Beaumont sooner rather than later. And that one is down for a long-term timeline. Maybe I'll ask the question, why is that? Why can't we move faster? Because there's certainly been people moving into our community from all places in the world. And I find that they don't have that face-to-face opportunity unless they make the effort. And I think it would be nice if someone made the effort to greet them. So just wondering if anyone could speak to why that's a long-term initiative.
For the chair to Councillor Barnhart, the Welcome Services Program is actually something that E is currently working on. So would you like to kind of just share a little bit? Keep it brief, but for sure.
Yeah, thank you for your question. Actually, we're currently working on the welcome service, because so many people are moving to Beaumont, and we're making plans to welcome newcomers and provide them with information on our services and programs and where they can get the support they need. So we're working on it.
So I must have missed that then, and I apologize for that. I was looking at the newcomer liaison. So that's something different.
That's a position that's been identified through the recommendations, but we're not waiting for that. We're getting on top of that.
Okay.
Like now, that's currently in the plan. So we don't have to wait for a position like that. That's what E is going to support in her role.
Perfect. Yeah, I think those were the factual things that I was looking for, but otherwise you have my support. I really do appreciate it. I know it's a tough job. I think it's one thing to have a philosophical and the framework laid out, the vision important, but it's the day-to-day phone calls and meetings and opportunities that we all have that we have to have enough courage. And I like seeing that word in your report as well, because it takes courage to stand up to someone and say that doesn't have to be that way. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I don't see any other mics on, so maybe just a concluding statement for me, or from me, I suppose. The word that comes to mind for me is readiness. What I'm seeing and hearing tonight is support. In order for initiatives to be successful, I think that organizations need to be ready for the initiative. And for me, the group that I see here, administration, mayor, council, the group in front of us right now, I think we're ready. So thank you, and appreciate your time tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, committee. That brings us to item 4.2, Protective Services Quarterly Report. I'd like to welcome administration up to present, please, and thank you. If your laptop is alive and you're ready, it's over to you. Thank you for joining us tonight.
Oh, no worries. Well, good evening, Mr. Chair, members of council. Once again, always a pleasure to come up and give you some updates on what's happening within protective services over the last first quarter. I apologize, this being May month, I was hoping to get it to you, but being the first one, had to sort out some internal details, and my ability with need more experience on Excel, I guess. But moving forward, as part of the second quarter, we will also have the RCMP update, and we'll have a member of the RCMP here joining me for that. So which will be very good. So my plan is to go through each division, give you kind of a broad view on where we are for call volumes, what's been happening, what we're seeing in the community for responses across all the divisions. And once again, at the end, I'm always open to questions if you do have on certain divisions, certain slides. Just let me know. We can stop if you have a question on a specific point or issue that you have a question on. We're more than willing to do that. So. Once again, starting off, Chief Melvin, I'm the Director of Protective Services and the Fire Chief for the City of Beaumont, here to present the first quarter report for Protective Services. First one we'll start off is the Beaumont Fire Services. No difference than last year when I came on here. We're seeing definitely an increase in fire-related calls between from January, February, March of last year compared to this year. January, February, on average, just shy of 50% increase, which is a lot. March slowed down a little bit, but still increased from previous years. Now, these calls are related to anything from alarm calls to motor vehicle collisions to structure fires to anything outside of the medical, typical a medical call. So everything that we do, rescues, all of those things are captured within its within fire-related calls, and that's how we're tracking in between last year and this year. So significant increase, obviously, for that type of action. There's a reaction on the department when it comes to manpower, resources, equipment, and a variety of other things. Medical calls, little anomaly there, but for January, yeah, significant increase again. We've seen a dip in February. We're not really sure why that is there. We attribute it to likely an anomaly. Maybe there's more AHS ambulances available at that time in the city. And then March, once again, now we're on a significant upward trend of increasing those calls. Now, none of these are shocking to us in protective services. We know that the community is growing. We know that we are constantly in the business of, if you need resources, call 911 for help, and we'll come assist. So those are so they're within the fire division. Municipal enforcement, we've seen a big change from last year to this year in how we're tracking our data. You remember community standards just came into fall of last year. We did have several other bylaws that were rescinded at, so that's how we've captured in that January to January. But you can see there's a significant increase in community standards calls that we're now starting to track. Some of them can be related to time of year, season, whatever it may be. Anything, likely a lot of them are due to parking or snow removal or some sort that affects the community on that standpoint. Animal control, very similar. We'll be bringing forward in likely in later in Q2 update to the responsible pet ownership bylaw that will hopefully capture and update a lot of the animal control issues that we're seeing in the community. Traffic safety, significant increase in traffic safety. Our officers out there being proactive and getting that information back from the community on where some of the issues that they're seeing, that we can go out and do some proactive enforcement and try to deal with some of our traffic safety concerns. Service calls, that just details how many calls are actually our officers are dealing with, files. You can see from last year to this year is a substantial increase. Some of that is due to the community standards bylaw, but also some of that is due to our messaging that if you have an issue, let us know. We need to be able to track it so we can see where the data is, so then we can correlate that to make sure we have the proper resources available to deal with those things. The warnings on from a provincial standpoint, so provincial ticketing compared to municipal tag bylaw infraction. Provincial warnings, you can see a substantial. I didn't put the percentages in there because they were completely way off the charts. But you can see right there from last year to this year, a big change. We've had a significant turnover within the department over the last year. The good thing that I'm seeing, we're tracking a lot of the information a lot better to provide that information. Provincial violations, you can see a lot of those are dealing with the activity that we've seen in the first quarter of this year. Municipal warnings. So some of those things could be a lot of times somebody may get a warning just because they're not aware of whatever that bylaw states or what they were doing. So education is a lot of times the piece. Municipal violations, a lot of these in the first quarter of this year are due to the bylaw infractions with the traffic safety bylaw on snow removal. So that's a big piece that you're going to see in January, February, and March. So those are real a quick detailed on our municipal enforcement on their activity. Automated traffic enforcement, always some good activity with ATE. But the stats are showing that ATE is working because we are seeing a decrease around the whole program compared from last year to this year. So people are more aware. I think we've been more open to where the ATE zones are. People are more aware of them. We have increased signage. All that information is going out on several different social media channels and on the website. And I think at the end of the day, people are seeing that, you know what, if they stay within the rules, then photo radar or automated traffic enforcement is not going to show up in your mail. So this is seeing a negative there is actually a good thing. We're seeing a decrease in that. You'll see a notice there everywhere else other than non-violations. Non-violations, a lot of times what happens is within the system, once the ticket is generated in the system, it's vetted 2 more times before an actual ticket is done. So somebody's reviewing the video to determine that an actual violation happened. The next person to determine where they actually in the ATE zone. So all of those things. So we've asked for more vigilance on to ensure that our non-violations are detailed. And at the time of this report, I did not have the updated numbers yet for March. So overall, seeing a decrease in violations is a good thing. It also means a decrease in the grant that comes out of the ATE program. So, but I'll take a decrease in violations if it means traffic safety improvement within the city. Like I said, the RCMP Q4 report will follow. It'll come through the email system, and that'll be done hopefully before the end of this month. But in future, the staff sergeant or Corporal Hack will be here to give you an update on their Q4 that they've just seen go by. So reason why that's delayed, federal strike impacted some administration staff to collect that data quick enough for us. So that's why we see it. But moving forward, we'll ensure that both myself and the member of the RCMP are here to answer any questions so that you have a lot of the information prior to any type of budget decisions are made on what the activity is for our department moving forward. So I know very quick, chances are there's probably a few questions, but I'll turn it back to the chair. I'm willing to answer any questions or concerns that you may have.
Yeah, thank you for figuring out Excel and making some great pie charts and some stats. And I think the year-over-year comparisons are really handy for everyone and provide some good perspective. And it was a nice way to present that data. So I thank you for that. And just looking for comments or questions from the group here, which I know will exist. We will start with Councillor Tessier, followed by Mayor Dunlop. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks, Chief, for the presentation. The stats are obviously increasing year after year with the growth and the city also getting older and the newer subdivisions getting older and more events. One thing I'd love to see in the report is the amount of calls the paid on calls are going versus when just the full-time members take care of it. Good statistic just to see when we're, yourself upcoming budget asking for firefighters and that burnout rate for people coming from home or mutual aid events. So, the reason is staggering already with the amount of calls we're going to, but just seeing, there is a threshold of how much we can expect out of people coming from home every day to respond. So, and then it looks like the bylaws, yeah, you can tell month after month, the increases are quite high. So another question would just be on the fire ban. How do we figure out if we should have a fire ban or we shouldn't type of thing?
Okay, through the chair to Councillor Tessier, we can definitely on the next report give a further breakdown of the fire related calls, full-time staff versus paid on call. That'll give you more of a detailed. Right now, I think it's probably split 50-50 or some months are 60-40, but definitely daytime call response has always been a concern for us here. Solely because the paid on calls are not in the area, everybody's at work and so that is done. With reference to the fire ban, so I have received significant calls on the fire ban. Obviously, as many of you are aware, the province put on a provincial fire ban on May 5th. That only applies to the forest protection area. So all that forestry area right now on the western side and kind of comes up all the north area, Lac La Biche area, all that stuff is where the fire ban's on. Doesn't cover cities, towns, villages, federal parks, things like that. Those jurisdictions are left up to determine local conditions. So last week or the week before last, when I think Edmonton put a fire ban on, we were looking here that no rain in the future forecast. Things were a lot of dried grass, nothing starting to green up yet. We went out and did an assessment and said, you know what, it's best to put a fire ban on until we get some rain to determine where we go for next. I'm really cautious on when to put a fire ban on and when to remove a fire ban. It's not just temperature, it's humidity, it's dried grass, is what type of trees do we have, how fast things are greening up, and really look at what is the risk of having a fire ban or not having a fire ban in our community. Fire advisories, fire restrictions. We're not a city and a department that issues out a lot of fire permits. So we don't have a lot of fire permits, which would be more in a rural setting that you'd see a lot of fire permits being issued out. People want to burn, get the crops ready or whatever it may be. We don't see a lot of that. So we put the fire ban on. We looked out. I had discussions with the CEO's office prior to us, like, hey, this is what I'm seeing. And it wasn't well, this municipality put it on, so we must put it on. I don't look at things like that. I look at what our local conditions are here. Leduc County at that time already put a fire ban on. So now we have Beaumont, I believe we were probably one of the last in the Edmonton metropolitan area to put a ban on. And that was with some due process to see, okay, what's happening out there in our community. We're not a community that has a large forest area. We don't have a lot of conifer trees, pine, spruce that are on public land or in places where there is also adjacent fire pits. Private land is different. What we can impose, but once again, when we look at all these things, a decision was made. The following week, which would have been early last week, we've seen some significant rainfall within 2 or 3 days straight. And at that point, after discussions with the CO's office, after looking what's happening in the community, watching what's happening with our temperature and a variety of things, how fast over the CO's office to remove the fire ban. The risk of putting a ban on at the end of the day, it was hard to justify, well, what the ban is going to prevent. Are we preventing backyard fire pits? Is that the risk to our community? Not so likely, right? A lot of times with these fire bans, they happen in major rural areas. But if you look on that Alberta Fire Ban website, there are several municipalities besides ours that are in an urban setting that have no fire ban. City of Calgary hasn't had one on this year as of yet. Now, obviously, they're a lot closer to us, but there's many municipalities that don't have that. Once again, that's information, but at the end of the day, I look at what is the risk here in the city of Beaumont. Received lots of calls about it, but at the end of the day, the risk of a smoker, the risk of a fire pit, if they burn within the rules and regulations that we have, the risk is no higher today than it's going to be in July. It's still going to be hot in July, still going to be 30 above. We're still going to have winds. The grass is green as it is right now. Obviously, it's not going to be 100% perfect. What we don't want to do is extend a fire ban and give the indication, well, the only reason why we have a fire ban on is because everybody else. There's a fire ban on in the county that's surrounding the city. So any accidental fires or any fires that happen outside of your backyard fire pit would likely be tied to some intentional setting. And then that's a different setting. Arson is related, and a fire ban ain't going to prevent any of that stuff. So all of those things I look at, I'm really, after working in a rural industry for 16 years and dealing with fire bans on, fire bans off, and fire advisors and a variety of things, I want to ensure that when we do put a ban on, which we did, we never had any rain and things were very dry, all the lawns were dry, there was a risk that when we had a fairly quick green up within and over the last 3 or 4 days continues to green up. So that was a decision that I made at that time in the consult with the CO's office. Lots of questions because everybody thinking, well, there's a fire ban on the province. How come you can't have a fire ban on in the city of Beaumont? But once we explained to them, okay, this is what we're seeing. This is what we're doing. We don't have fire permits issued out within the city. We are constantly watching and driving around, and counties really have a wide area with limited resources. We have a concentrated area and all our resources are in a city, and we have a fire ban around us. So anything that would happen outside of our city boundaries is either going to be based on pure accidental, intentional, or some type of machinery, which a fire ban would not prevent any of those things are happening. So that was the process that I go through to do that. Obviously, it's not something that is off the corner of my desk and I just decide, let's have a fire ban, let's not. I do consult COs often, say, hey, this is what I'm seeing out there. My people are over there, this is what they're seeing. And this is the feedback that I get from my staff. And at the end of the day, I make the recommendation how difficult or not difficult it is to remove or put one on. I make that recommendation to the CO's office, and that was the process that we did for the last week and a half.
Great. Yeah. Thanks so much, Chief, and appreciate the background information and the details of it. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And on that fire ban topic, you know, what I heard was, you know, what is the practical risk to Beaumont? Collaboration between the fire chief and the CAO's office, using all of the information surround you. So very thorough answer, and I think that that puts a pin in that topic. So yeah, thank you. Over to you, Mayor Dunlop. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Appreciate that. And thank you for the concise and informed report. Much appreciated. Thank you for clarifying also that the fire ban is a municipal thing that we decide for ourselves as opposed to following other municipalities. Some people think we just follow other people and we don't. Glad to think clarifying that information, how you explained was very helpful. I just have one quick question, Chief, is that on the fire related statistics for January, February, March, all 3 years went up over the year before. Does that include any false alarm calls, or that is strictly calls that were actually acted on?
No, these are actual responses that we would do. What we, through the chair to the mayor. The trend that I've seen that I don't want to see is that we've seen the increase of substantial damage to the structure fires. We are aware of the one that happened on Christmas Day. We've had 2 significant other ones since then. We've really engaged our fire prevention folks to try to bring that statistic up. But these stats will, as your community grows, and unfortunately, fire risk never goes away. We need to continually educate and educate and educate. But even through education and detection and everything that's in your house, we're still seeing those accidental fires that are happening there. So those are all captured on responses. So for alarm calls, motor vehicle collisions, all of those things are kind of captured. We're on record again to have projected to have an increased response rate compared to last year. So as the community grows, as the activity grows in our community, as the travel, we likely not going to see a decrease. And this is typical of a municipality our size that's growing at the rate we're growing. You're going to have these type of issues at protective services as a whole. We're going to see an increase of call volume across the board.
Well, thank you. I appreciate the clarity, because my understanding was that these are actually bona fide calls that we just wanted to, they weren't simply false alarms. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you. I'm going to sneak one in here myself, and then Councilor Barnhart, you'll be up. Looking to the animal control numbers, one of the things I noticed when I was in my yard doing some late night yard work last night was the yipping and yowling of the coyotes. Just wondering, would coyote generated calls be captured in the animal control numbers right now?
I'd have to reconfirm that, Mr. Chair. I can follow up with an email to see if we captured any type of coyotes that have entered the municipality. Likely, if they have, they're probably based on an RCMP call volume. But I can follow up with them to see if we've received any type of concern when it comes to coyotes being so close to the rural areas and farmlands. So.
Yeah, thank you for that. I know, and I know it's a challenge to deal with that issue, with, you know, the resources we have and the different jurisdictions associated with that issue as well. Councilor Barnhart, over to you.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for your candor. Appreciate all of the information in the report and in your answers. My question's about the automated traffic enforcement. I don't think I've ever seen numbers go down that much, and I'm just wondering, is there anything else that changed that might have accounted for that? Like, for example, maybe we didn't have as many locations set up or something like that.
Through the chair to Councillor Barnhart, obviously the province came out with some substantial changes to the ATE program last year. We did reduce some sites that weren't permitted any longer. But I hope that, and I'm only hoping that the reason why is that people are just more aware, because we're more open where these locations are at. We've seen signage now being placed on vehicles. Like I said, social media, Facebook, the platforms that the city uses. People are aware that those zones are there for a reason, because we've seen high risk incidents and people get hurt. And if they just take the foot off the gas or keep the foot on the brake a little longer, then they're not going to see these. And hopefully we become a community where we have such low automatic traffic enforcement calls that the risk is not there anymore. And that means the program may not be viable in the future. So we can only hope that the decrease in call volume is related to an increase in the safety of how people move and interact in our community. So
We'll
That's
be
a hope.
watching the next time. Okay, thank you.
Councillor McCoy-Swain, you're up.
I probably shouldn't, but I can't let this go. So just fundamentally, philosophically, I just completely disagree. I know just about posting them out online. The reason why those numbers are going down is because people know where they are, so they slow down in those areas. And so, the reason why I support it generally is because people know in Beaumont, right, that there is ATE and you should slow down and make sure you stop everywhere. And so I know people who look at the paper, okay, the colonial stop is on the 27th of May, and therefore I'm good without it, right? And I know that's a poor attitude, but fundamentally, I know why we put it out there, regulations, all that sort of stuff. But, I think the message that I know you're not trying to show here is that, just on those one stops on one day, we're trying to reduce the speeding and the traffic violations across the board. I don't take too much comfort in the data. I'm glad that our residents are less out of pocket, but I'm not sure that data shows me how much safer we are. So just a point, and no question, and feel free to shut down my argument if you want, but I thought I had to say that, sorry.
Thank you, Councillor McCoy-Swain, for that. So I think I don't see any other mics on right now, so I'll just wrap with a general comment on the report. Again, the presentation of data, like I said, I think is really well done. Some of those percentages now that are really high, I think they will trend out as the new bylaws come into effect, and as the education campaign surrounding any changes that we've made to either the community standards bylaw, the traffic safety bylaw, and those bits are coming up. I know there's a campaign underway right now to address some of the changes that are coming about in the traffic safety bylaw. So I'm looking past you over your right shoulder at the communications folks there, and thank you for that. And I do enjoy the in-laws for more than 3 days once in a while, so I just got to acknowledge that, right? So well done there. So that being said, thank you for your time tonight, and we'll move on to item 4.3. But I think before we do that, maybe we'll just take a 5 minute, we'll do a 7-minute bio break. It's 6:23 right now, so we'll reconvene at 6. Welcome back to the May 16th Committee of the Whole meeting, part 2. We will now proceed with item number 4.3, capital project management process and project updates. Looks like we welcome Director Lewicki to the microphone, and if you could make sure that you're speaking up and into the microphone fairly loudly, it'll make it easier for everyone to hear. So thank you very much, and over to yourself. Oh, sorry. There. Opening comments from Deputy CEO. Here we go. Sorry.
Thanks. I thought I would take this opportunity to introduce Aaron here. No, we all know him. So today's presentation is meant to be a continuation of the infrastructure departmental overview that was presented around this time last year. Our intent is to take the committee through our capital management process here at the city for approved capital projects at a very high level. We do have another presentation planned for the committee this summer regarding the 10-year capital plan, and further information about capital planning budget approval will be coming from finance over the next few weeks. Over the past year, we've done a lot of work. We've refined our capital projects processes and reorganized our staffing models to align with the project management phases that Mr. Lewicki will take us through. We utilize a project management office approach. Because of our size and limited resourcing, we do have to tap into other staff across the organization for support when needed. For example, we would tap into comms. We are also further refining the sequencing of our projects to better align with procurements, construction timelines, locations, staffing expertise, and other variables. Today is also intended to provide more information to council about what we expect of ourselves. Our goal is always to deliver on approved projects safely, on time, and on budget. Further, we aim to keep council and the public informed on projects as they progress. Project status updates are provided monthly on our website. As well, we aim to provide updates as part of our quarterly financial and year-end reports. We also want to keep council informed on any significant exceptions as soon as possible. How we do that may vary depending on the situation. For example, today, Aaron will take you through an update about the Centreville Dog Park and Community Garden project. As the city continues to grow, our project complexity and controls continue to increase. We do have a dream state that we've identified and that we want to get to administratively, and we're getting closer. I hope that this presentation provides the committee with additional information. We have kept it at a high level, but just know that each bullet that will be displayed on the screen has several sub-bullets and many staff working on those items. And I'll turn it over to Mr. Lowicki. Thanks.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, committee, administration, and members of the public. My name is Aaron Lowicki, Director of Infrastructure. This evening, I'll be presenting Beaumont's process for managing capital projects. This presentation, as Ms. O'Neill indicated, is intended as an overview of the overall process. I won't be going into details or drilling down into specifics, as obviously this process has many layers and many pieces to it. So proficient project management is critical to the success of any municipality to facilitate the completion of growth and renewal projects to satisfy the needs of the municipality. For 2023, the value of the capital budget in Beaumont is $19 million. As city growth continues and infrastructure ages, we will be required to continually invest in renewal and growth projects to meet the growing demands of our city. The city delivers a wide variety of capital growth and renewal projects annually. Successful project management requires significant planning and alignment with strategic plans, which are captured in Beaumont's 5-year capital plan. The city's capital plan provides a roadmap for the development and construction of capital projects for continued growth and maintenance of existing city assets to support city operations and programs. Developing the city's capital plan requires significant effort to ensure growth and operational needs are achieved. This plan is developed through prioritization and alignment of various priorities and relevant planning documents, including council strategic plan, master plans, asset management plans, and various strategy documents. There are 3 critical elements for successful planning and capital projects, which include budget, scope, and schedule. And we ask ourselves the questions as indicated there to develop those elements. Defining the scope of a project allows for an understanding of what activities are to be included in the project to meet project objectives. The budget facilitates financing to allow the scope to be achieved, while the schedule allows for an understanding of project milestones and when a project needs to be completed. There are 4 phases associated with our project management system that are utilized by our project team, which include initiate, plan, build, and close. In the next few slides, I will go through these phases in detail. To initiate a project, some baseline information must be confirmed prior to advancing the project into the next phase of planning, which include defining the overall scope for the project, confirming project objectives, identify the risk associated with design and construction of the projects, complete preliminary estimate
to facilitate budget approval. Project and budget approval. This is a council responsibility. Identify stakeholders, identify design, construction scope, develop project charter and document initiation phase includes scope, budget, stakeholders, risk, etc. The third phase is called plan. There's a quote from Abraham Lincoln that is fitting when it comes to planning. Give me 6 hours to chop down a tree, and I will spend the first 4 sharpening the axe, which is a reference to the value of spending adequate time to focus on planning elements of any project or task. Anyone who has tried to cut down a tree with a blunt axe will appreciate this quote. The planning phase of a project includes formalizing, it includes formalizing the scope and other elements from the initiation phase into a tender document for design. The design tender allows for the city to procure the most suitable firm to complete the design and prepare for the construction tender and completion. This phase includes development of stakeholder and public engagement plans, which will vary significantly depending on the project. Some projects will have very intensive engagement efforts, while others can proceed with very little engagement and rely mostly on informing the public of the project to be completed. Engagement feedback is collected and will be incorporated into the final design with alignment with project objectives. Engagement can include multiple touch points with stakeholders and the public to generate feedback and inform the design. The next phase is the build phase. One of the more exciting ones because it's where we start to see things happen in the field. The build phase progresses from the planning phase into all design elements are developed into a package to allow contractors to provide pricing on what would cost to build a design that was developed. This process allows for the city to choose the best contractor based on predetermined evaluation criteria that can include price, experience, methodology, and other factors depending on what's most important for that specific project. The most suitable contractor is awarded the work and is contracted by the city. Once awarded, the project commences and the work will be monitored according to 3 critical elements discussed earlier: scope, schedule, and budget. Project closure is the final phase of the project management process that is critical to wrapping up a project. It is important that the city conduct adequate closure procedures to ensure that contractual and financial commitments are met on all capital projects. This will include managing any deficiencies or deviations from scope of work and contractual obligations in order to ensure successful completion of the project. Projects can have a warranty and/or maintenance period depending on the contract and project requirements. This period of time allows for the contractor to maintain the asset and monitor performance of the asset and any corrections that may be required before the final acceptance, which will result in the end of the project. Once the project is completed, it can be handed over to the operations team to be added to the city inventory. At this time, the project team will review lessons learned and celebrate completion of the project. Implementation for capital planning. The intention for this slide is to provide context into the value of completing adequate planning to develop accuracy for scope, schedule, and budget in the construction and closure phases of a project. This approach allows for increased certainty in budgeting for construction costs, for future capital budget planning and approval, additional time to engage on public-facing projects, more time to develop proper scope, and a deeper understanding of the project risks and development of mitigation strategies. This concludes my presentation regarding the project management process, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have on this topic. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you for the presentation tonight. And lots of good information and, back to the basics on project management and reminders and commitments and, updates all built into one. Just a question on the item here. Would we expect the update on the dog park project now, or do you want to go through questions for this first? What is simpler? Perhaps we do questions now, or
through the chair or to the chair. I'm good either way. I was going to take questions on the presentation and then give the dog park update.
Yeah, let's split it up then.
Yeah, the dog park update is basically just what's in the report. I don't have a lot of extras to say with it. It's going to be pretty much what's there. It's small, but it's your call.
You betcha. Okay, yeah, we'll entertain questions on the presentation here, and we've got some buttons going here. Got Councillor Monkoff Swain, followed by Miller and Barnhart. Thank you.
Thank you, and feel free to cut me off. I've got a decent amount. This topic is important and timely. So first, thanks for the overview. As Steve mentioned, a good kind of PMO reminder 101 around how we do things. The first question I have, recognizing you're here speaking to this, right? But who owns our project management process in Beaumont, right? You represent infrastructure, but there are projects that are done through recreation. There are projects done. So who ultimately is accountable for project management in Beaumont?
Through the chair to Councillor Monkoff Swain. So we have a projects team, and there's a manager that reports into me, and they manage the projects. We obviously have project sponsors that may be in recreation or other departments, and we collaborate together, but the projects are managed through our projects team.
Okay, so just to clarify, we have a group within, and I should know this, but I don't. So we have a group within the infrastructure group that is, because I brought up project management office type conversations before and kind of evolved, but are you saying that we have a group who specifically their job is to look after and manage our projects that falls with under you? Is that what I'm hearing?
Through the chair to Councillor Monkoff Swain, that is correct.
Okay, that's good to hear. And then when it comes to the broader projects, like outside of infrastructure, for example, that's where you'd implement that project sponsor kind of approach, where like if we're building a Paul Diamond, for example, maybe Paul is kind of a sponsor, but again, it's centralized within that project, those projects group. Okay,
that's correct.
Then maybe I'll pivot a little bit here. To talking about, because you mentioned a couple of times around timing up here, and what I'm starting to see, and I'm not starting to see, but what I have seen it is by the time we get our budget approved, right, middle of December, it's a pretty short window for you guys to get organized. We're putting a lot of pressure on you. Construction season comes pretty quickly here. I'm curious if there's been any thought to really significantly dragging that back, that capital project for next year, for example, and having that discussion, late summer, early fall, to give you the time to do the engagement. Because we come up with all these crazy ideas up here that you guys are like, oh man, okay, now we've got to go out and do these 5 things. And what I'm finding is that we're approving this in December, and then we're at Christmas, and then we get into January, then you've got to do the engagement on it. And then you've got to go out and figure out, tender the project, all that sort of process. And then we're missing the construction window. And then the frustration is, there's something that we thought was approved in the 2020 X budget, and it's not getting built. So maybe not a serious question for you directly, but more broadly, and curious if CIO wanted to weigh in on this, but I'm curious if we think that would give us more time. Like at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter when we approve these projects. I would rather give administration more time to go through that process and be able to come back with any updated estimates prior to potentially missing out on a construction season. So I'll leave that there to see if there's any thoughts or comments from, I see Mike has got his hand up here, but.
As Aaron had outlined in either the report or the presentation, and maybe missed it, what we would like to move to ideally is a design 1 year, build the next. That would help us avoid what we just had with the rink shacks, for instance, where we're taking a Class C budget plus or minus 50% and trying to design it, do the public engagement and build it in the same year. If we could move to, as Aaron is suggesting, this design build, there are some that don't need design and then you just get them done. But on the bigger projects, we like to move to that. And council's going to set aside some design money based on a conceptual budget. And then we would come back the next year with those numbers and say, here we're at, here's where we're at.
Yeah, because I'm kind of there. Like I want to give that time, that threshold there for you to be able to do the work, because I think we're putting the undue pressure on, and it's resulting in that plus or minus 50%, right? But I'd be curious around the threshold around at what point, and this is not an answer you're going to have now, but the thinking around at what point does it need to be that full year of design, right? Is it a dollar threshold? Is it how do we figure that out, right? And not to bring up the past, but like an outdoor rink for $300,000, right? I would, think that if we gave you 6 months to look at that over the kind of fall and winter, that we could be ready to go into the construction season, that sort of thing. So I'd be curious around that philosophy around it. And if we need to bring that budget process back to help with that, then that helps kind of speed up the process.
Well, Aaron, I'm going to turn it over to you in a second because you'll be able to answer this much more effectively. But my experience is there is a threshold. That's not necessarily a number. It's a combination of things, so it's kind of moving. And this is where Aaron will be able to add some value. But it's certainly something that we could look at. The notion of looking at capital earlier in the year, and possibly, if I'm hearing you say that, is that being an option of approving that budget earlier in the year? That's something I'd have to talk through finance with. It's an interesting concept. But Aaron, please address the design build piece.
Through the chair to Councillor Monkhouse-Swain, one of the factors that we looked at for this presentation, which was the second last slide before the questions piece, was that if we get through doing the design in one season, then we can tender out more quickly in this, like once it's approved in December, we can go into January and be working on our construction tender and get that out early and take full advantage of the season, because the design would be done. Presumably the engagement would be done. Obviously there'd be some communication pieces there, but we would have those pieces together. So that would give us the full season to do it. Now with our capital plan that I've mentioned as well, the idea would be to organize it in such a way that you would see more organization of design 1 year, build another year. And there might not be consecutive years, but you would see designs being brought forward for a budget year with progressive, with your construction in a future year. And that way we have projects, designs on the shelf we can pull off and say, oh, we should build it this year. Also, if we have the design and council wants to build something a year sooner, if we have the design, we can pull that in pretty quick. So it gives us some flexibility if we have our designs in place, if that makes sense.
No, it does. And I definitely get it for the planned long-term items that we know that we have on the capital plan, bringing that design piece. I get that for sure. But you're also dealing with an impatient council just by nature. We want things done. And so that there's that kind of catch-22 there where, when there are the things that, we hear about through the community or ideas that we will look to bring forward. And just, I won't reiterate my point, but, Mike, you said you would bring that concept, that thought back to administration around potentially looking at that capital budget earlier to take advantage of a few months in the fall to get ready to tender it at the right time, so that we're getting the right pricing and all that sort of stuff. So I appreciate that. Just the last quick question for me on this, the two projects that I can recall where we went outside for a project manager, being the Ball Diamonds / Dog Park, and then the new rec center, or the addition to the rec center, I should say. I'm just curious at what point do we think about bringing in external support for that type of project when you've got something that large, right? To take the pressure off internally. How do you or your team think about, when do we bring in someone externally to actually run the project?
Through the chair to Councillor Munkoff Swain, it's definitely something we factor in when we're actually looking at, at our project charter and that initiation phase of the project. First, we're going to look at, what kind of resourcing do we have? Do we have the ability to do this? Do we have the expertise in-house to do this? Currently, there's projects we do rely significantly on consultant oversight to help deliver these projects. So we do a combination of those things with obviously with some city oversight, but there's definitely a combination of both. And we do factor that in, resourcing, knowledge base, all of that comes into play.
Yeah, I guess the point I'll reinforce then is, when we get to the capital budget time, and, a lot of the time the items are capital items that administration is bringing forward, right? And so just as we're going through those items, sharing your philosophy around that, your thought process around, hey, we think that this design is going to take a year, so we're asking for this year versus this one you could probably get a bit sooner, or this one is a large project, we're going to recommend having someone come in and manage this project. I just think, we get the little one-page snapshots around it, but understanding how the city is going to manage that project, I think helps us in our expectations as well. So, I recognize you're here to talk about the project management, and I'm kind of weaving in a lot of finance questions in here, without the finance team here to support you. So, I think my point has been made here, and I look forward to hearing feedback from the broader group around if we could help ourselves out with timing. So I'll leave it there. Thanks, Chair.
Yeah, great comments and good responses so far. Thank you very much. Over to you, Councillor Miller.
Thank you. And thank you, Mr. Loki, for the presentation. I looked at this for a long time, really just truly trying to understand the phases here for me. And I appreciate Councillor Munkoff Swain touching on the fact that we do have a PMO office, project management. Didn't know that. That's wonderful to hear. So first question for me though is preliminary estimate in phase one. I just need to know specifically if you can tell me what that entails. In my mind, it is the numbers that we are seeing in the budget. So out of the preliminary estimate, that is what is put into the next bullet, which is the project and budget approval. So I just need clarification on that so that I can get into my next question.
Through the chair to Councillor Miller. So with that, it really depends on essentially, that would be an initial budget that we would come up with when we look at the capital plan, for instance. Depending on how far out that project is, it might be more preliminary than it would be if it was next year, right? It really depends on where we are with the project, what stage the project is at in the capital plan.
Okay, maybe just let me rephrase that. What number is in the capital budget? Is that where does that number come from? This is just fresh. I mean, we just went through, I don't want to bring up the ring shacks, but when I'm truly trying to understand when we're given, numbers in front of us, and I want to look at those and make decisions based on their accuracy. So I need to know, initially, how is that number formulated?
No, fair enough. Through the mayor to Councillor Miller, through the chair to Councillor Miller. The numbers are based on, if we don't have a design, there are Class D estimate, which are plus or minus 50% or up to 100%, depending. If there's this is where I'm trying to get to with, if we have the design, we can get that to a much, plus or minus 15%, right? But when we don't have a scope, we don't have a design, which in some cases is what we do our best to come up with numbers that seem reasonable, but the problem is that, for instance, let's use the rink shacks as an example. We didn't know the extent of the servicing that was required there. And I don't want to get back into that, but I'm just saying that's a significant cost that without doing the design, we don't know what that value is. And it's hard for us to say, oh, well, we'll just tell them it's $2 million, because then we'll go, well, that's ridiculous.
Right.
Right. So we try to come up, again, Class D, very high level, thinking about
Yeah.
what a facility would cost of the nature of the scope that we're trying to fulfill.
Right.
And we go from there.
So I think for us as a council, that's kind of the gap that I want to, shrink with the 50 or 100%. That to me is concerning. I put it back into what I do as a full-time job, and so preliminary estimate would be at the, and I'm glad to hear that you have a project management office stage. So that would be the stage where you have the estimators internally, which it sounds like you do, would give us a ballpark number. And then that comes to council. We've got the estimate and the budget approval in the same phase. So we're basing our decision based on this preliminary estimate, but we're not actually going out to tender until phase 3. So
For the construction.
for the construction,
we
but
would
you
be
don't
tendering
actually have it release construction tender. So you don't actually know the construction cost until phase 3.
That's correct. We would not have bid costs
Yeah.
in place until, but it's common practice to get an approved budget with a pre-tender estimate, go out to bid, compare your pricing,
Yeah.
and then adjust after that.
Oh, I very much know the process. I'm shocked by the difference in estimation to cost, and how can we, I'm not, there's lessons learned on all projects. There always is. I'm trying to understand how do you see maybe a way that we can strengthen this process so we're getting more accurate numbers. We're making decisions. I have to say, I did go back and I watched our budget meeting from December 1st on this one, specific project that we referred to. And we really did at length talk about the design being compromised. is that going to be an issue if we go right to construction? And we really honed in on these questions. So I'm having trouble, having trouble understanding this process, because I certainly don't want to be wasting time and making decisions on numbers when they could be 100% different.
Well, through the chair to Councillor Miller, this is why we're proposing this idea of doing the design prior to and not doing design, engagement, and construction all in one season. There's no way we can get accurate estimates for that unless we design everything all at once and then throw it out over a 10-year capital cycle.
Okay. Okay.
I'll just jump in there a second too. And I think that is the point of the last slide too, with the implementation, the slide that's titled implementation for capital planning around, the light bulb and the yellow logo there, the initiate plan, and then future year being the build close. And I do recognize the bullet points that you're pointing out, in the pictographs there, as pieces that are done at certain points in time. And that's for Mr. Lewicki and his team to work through as a matter of good project management. Looks like the CAO wants to jump in. Thank you.
Yeah, and great conversation. I think it's important that all of us understand what we're up against and what we're doing. So I certainly welcome this. Aaron basically just said what I was just going to remind us is where we want to get to is that design. Until we have a design, we're not, this, we don't have an accurate budget. So I want to use the outdoor rinks as an example. We budgeted in the capital for $200,000 a rink. That was based on experience and a project manager's last outdoor rink that they built. That's all it was built on. Then the design comes back and it's $600,000 for each one. We just saw the exact same thing happen with the rink shacks. We looked at what we had based on our experience and what we had costed in the past, and we put it in a 5-year plan. Next thing you know, it's on this year's capital plan. And right then and there, we should have stopped. Admin should have stopped and said, this budget is not accurate. Until we get a design, it's not accurate. So, and again, it's all learning. So it's a great conversation. Moving to a design 1 year on these more complicated projects and a build the next will solve it, as will us at Capital. We're going to be much more diligent when a project is moved up and make it clear that all of us understand that this is a Class C budget. So put a placeholder of $200,000, but look what happened. It can come back at 1.2 million. So I understand council's frustration completely, and we are just as frustrated. And we know we can do better. And Aaron's put a process in front of us that can help us. So it's a good conversation. Thank you.
I would also add that I've had situations where we've gone through and done all the design work, got to a pre-tender with a Class A estimate or Class B estimate, and we were still way off. These days with market conditions, sometimes you just don't get it right. And there's not much we can do, just depending on whatever type of unit rate we're getting for supplies or costs, or things are hard to get, so they cost more. So there's always error. And to Mr. Swartz's point, definitely lessons learned. We do reflect on that. I recognize that there were some, we could have communicated that better, and we will take that away and work on that. So
yeah.
Just a quick question there. We're beating ourselves up, over this project, and I think we've got to where we're going to get with that rink shack project right now. But the other piece is besides numbers, one of the challenges we can have with projects is actually engagement as well. And Councillor Malkoff-Swain brought that up, is just, what is the required engagement to do project X? If we want to build this there, perhaps we need input from this stakeholder group or this landowner or this expert in the field in order to hone in on exactly what we want to build. So that could, as quickly and easily as dollars, start to get in the way of timelines, expectations,
absolutely,
and public perception, right? Because sometimes I think what we take for granted sometimes is just go do this, just go do it quick. Can't you just do that? What do you mean? What do you mean you can't just do that? I can just do that, right? But there's a whole bunch of things that go into just doing that, right? If we're using air quotes, and I think that's what we're trying to get across here tonight with with this whole process. So. Councillor Miller.
Just to close on that, and that's just it, Aaron. Like it's not a coming from me personally. It's not trying to identify what one person did wrong or what was left out. I think it's just having that conversation and like knowing now, like Mike answered that question, pretty with clarity. Is just we need to be more careful with not rushing the design stage or going right to construction. Lesson learned. That's our lessons learned for me anyway, because I took it, that, all right, we're rolling here. So lesson learned, and I'm feeling good about going forward. And, I think we have a little more clarity. So thank you very much.
Yeah, that's good. And I'm happy to be able to have the discussion and be my first committee of the whole with the electronics here and things and things working in a positive way. So I don't see any other mics lit up now. So thank you very much for the presentation. Ms. O'Neill, thank you for the introduction. CAO for your words of encouragement and relief on some of the things that we've been experiencing together. And I think we're on to great things for the projects that we're committed to build in Beaumont. So with that, we will conclude item 4.3. Thank you very much.
Sorry.
Oh, sorry. Yes. Sorry. Let's get a dog park update. Let's not forget about that. Thank you.
No, fair enough. Thank you. So I'll just basically go through what the report says. I'm not going to tell you anything much more than that, but So we have an approved scope for design engagement and construction of the dog park and community garden as was approved in the budget. The design engagement portion was awarded to a design firm, which has been completed. Preliminary feedback, and I know you've heard this in another report from economic development regarding anyways, preliminary feedback indicates concerns with timing and scope for the development of the project. Adjacent landowners are in the process of completing the designs of their own sites, which may impact the design and construction of this project, along with the potential for this project being located next to an active construction site in the short term. Due to identified environmental concerns, a phase 1 ESA is underway for this parcel. The phase 1 ESA will aid in determining if further intrusive investigation is required at the site from a regulatory perspective. In environmental investigations, remedial efforts will need to be completed prior to further development of the site. Given the above, administration has paused further design, engagement, and construction efforts for 2023 on this project until we further identify the extent of impacts on this parcel.
Yeah, thank you for that update. I think that's pretty straightforward and makes a lot of sense. So I think we're there for the right reasons. So again, I don't see anything lighting up here. So now thank you very much. And we will. No, we were going to be all our.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. Now we'll move on to 4.4, the 2022 report to the community, and welcome Mr. Berezowski to present that.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and to the rest of the committee. Good evening. I am, for the folks watching, I'm the Director of Communications, Mike Berezowski, and tonight I'm very happy to present the annual report to the community. This highlights the many, many activities and achievements of council and the city in the past year. We do that annually, and it is posted to the website with mention on social media and by way of news alert to direct people to the report. Presenting it tonight for information. Next steps will be to have it translated into French and then posted on the website once it's finalized.
I often don't know if I'm prepared for the brief presentation that we sometimes get. So thank you for that. And I know the report speaks for itself. It's well done. I love the photos. I love the graphic design that goes into these reports. Open it up to members of the committee for comments or questions on the 2022 report to the community as presented. Thank you. Yeah, it's a great report. Mayor Dunlop, over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just excellent work. The layout of it is incredibly well done. The photographs of the wording and structures is really well done report. I know how much work went into this, and I think it's going to be very well received by the community. I expect a lot of high marks in this from the community. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
That's great. Thank you for the presentation. With that, we'll move on to number 5 here, councillor inquiries. Are any members of committee bringing any inquiries this evening at all? I don't see any. Just let me get to the right spot here. Don't see any councillor inquiries, so that's great. With that, we'll move into item 6, closed session. Looking for a member of committee to move us into closed session, please. Mayor Danlock, you're up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move that council move into closed session at 7:11 p.m. pursuant to section 24 and 25 of the Freedom of Information Protection and Privacy Act. Thank you.
We'll start the vote on that, please. Like we have responses from everyone, and that vote is unanimous. We'll just take a moment to reset the room and prepare for the